Well, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to talk. The challenge of doing something like this is I could spend hours talking about this. So I will try to limit my presentation and keep it concise, and so that we have time to talk and engage with each other about this. To me, it's a mark that so many people are here around this topic of resilience, and I'm guessing it's because all of us have found it very difficult to feel resilient in the midst of the pandemic and everything else that's going on in our world that's totally separate from FSHD. And so having to deal with the disease on top of everything else feels like a lot. I know it does for me, and I'm sure it does for you as well. So let's just talk a little bit about resilience. Dictionary defines it as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, or toughness. And it's used to describe the ability of a substance to spring back into shape, to bend without breaking, I guess. A definition that I've used in research publications is it's the human ability to withstand stressful challenges and retain or regain normal functioning. Okay, now how do I change my slides? That's another whole question. Okay, this is just a brief kind of historical note. 40 years ago, we weren't talking about resilience. We had started talking about risk. And that's because of researchers like these that are on the screen. Michael Rudder is an English psychiatrist who had worked with children. And he had identified through research 6 risk factors that were associated with mental health problems. And those risk factors are marital discord, low social class, large families, father in jail, mother with a mental health disorder, and foster care placement. Those are all things we still today see as big risks for kids. Well, what he found was that for people who had only one or less of those factors, there was no increased risk of mental health problems. If you had 2 of those factors, your risk quadrupled. And if you had 4 of those factors, you had 20 times the risk of mental health problems. And those were identified as, kind of environmental things. These are not things anybody has the ability to choose. We don't choose the family that we grow up in. We don't choose the environment and the people around us. As children, we just are where we are. Well, 20 years later, another landmark study came out in 1998. This study was actually done in the Kaiser Permanente healthcare system down in LA. And Dr. Folletti identified 10 childhood risk factors and found that those predicted physical and mental health problems, both disease, physical disease, and mental health disease, as well as early death. Having 4 or more of those events happen to you gave you 4 to 12 times the risk of alcohol and drug problems, depression, suicide, 2 to 4 times likelihood to have poor health behaviors, including things like smoking. It predicted higher rates of heart disease, lung disease, liver disease, cancer, and early death. All of that from things you cannot change. We've all heard the Serenity Prayer that's a part of AA. And I just want to kind of highlight the 3 pieces of it. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, one of the things that happened out of that risk literature is that people started to figure out that, hey, there are some people who have these risk failures who go on and do well. They thrive. What's that about? And so that started the whole new area of investigation in looking at what are the predictors of positive outcome, what are the resilience factors. So I'm going to talk today about one factor in resilience, and I picked that one because it's something that we can change. It's something we can do individually something about. We don't have as much control over our biology. FSHD is genetic. We get it because we get it from our family. The family system that we grow up in is the family system we grew up in. We didn't get to choose it. The environment where we lived is the environment where we lived. But there are things that we can change. I am really, really excited to tell you about a study that was just published in January of this year. And I've been waiting for it for like the last 2.5 years, waiting to know when it would be finished. This is a randomized control trial of acceptance and commitment therapy for improving the quality of life in people with muscle disease. This is only the third randomized control trial of a psychotherapy related to a disease like FSHD. It's the first and only randomized control trial of acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's the only one that's directed at a broad array of outcomes. The two previous trials were focused explicitly on helping people increase their physical activity to reduce fatigue. This trial is focused on quality of life, and I think that's really important. Now, the key is I'm not going to tell you very much about this study, because I'm reserving talking more about it for next week, actually, at the 360 conference, which is also being hosted virtually. So if you want to hear a little bit more about this study, you can sign into that talk as well. But I am going to talk a little bit about what's at the core of acceptance and commitment therapy. And that's a resilience factor that's been identified through a pretty large body of research so far. And that factor is called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is the ability to feel and think with openness, to attend voluntarily to your experience of the present moment, and to move your life in directions that are important to you. Building habits that allow you to live life in accordance with your values and aspirations. It's about learning not to turn away from what is painful. Instead, turning toward your suffering in order to live a life full of meaning and purpose. That quote comes from Stephen Hayes, who is the creator of acceptance and commitment therapy. So how does FSHD challenge your resilience? My experience of that is I find it difficult to respond in a helpful way to that constant and unpredictable physical decline that is FSHD. It's difficult to continually have to come to terms with new losses, new things that are taken away. It's hard to come to terms with sadness that comes with those losses. It's a challenge to accept without bitterness the reality of the me that's now and not the me that used to be. And the fact that most other people don't understand what I'm going through. And it's difficult to find ways with this disease to stay engaged in the pursuit of meaningful and purposeful activities when it seems like all of our physical abilities are being taken away one after another. So what I'm going to talk about for the next just few slides are really the core elements of acceptance and commitment therapy. And they are processes that have been shown through research to increase psychological flexibility. So the first of these, there are three of these, and we like to think of them as maybe the three legs of a stool. You know, it's hard to be supported on a stool with only one leg, even two legs. Once you add a third leg, there's a sense of stability that can support a great deal of weight. And similarly, these three processes working together can help us become more psychologically flexible and result in improved quality of life. Even in the face of things that all of us are dealing with, like a pandemic, and having to stay in the house, or having to wear masks, or having to engage with people who don't want to do any of those things. So what are these factors? The first is what we call awareness. And I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail. Awareness is involved with strengthening our ability to notice what's going on around us and within us. And it's helping us to become aware of a larger sense of ourselves, that self that doesn't just react to things, but gets to choose our direction. The second process is what we call opening up. And this one is really difficult, and it has been really difficult for me. It involves having willingness to experience whatever is present, even if that is unpleasant. And it's simultaneously the ability to begin to see our thoughts not as facts, but simply as thoughts. The third process is finding ways to identify what's important to us, and then beginning that process of doing, taking bold actions that move us in directions that matter to us. And that's really what brings us meaning and purpose and fulfillment in our lives, is the being able to be engaged in things that matter. All right. So one part of awareness involves something that you've heard about on various presentations within the FSHD Society. It's talked about a lot in popular culture right now. And that's this idea of what we call mindfulness. People are big advocates of mindful meditation, for example. Well, Jon Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness this way. It's paying attention in a particular way, and that's paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Those three elements need to be there for this to be considered mindfulness. Our minds are really powerful things, and they're really great in so many ways. They've solved so many problems in human existence. They've also created a lot of problems in human existence. Our minds have the ability to automate things. So when let me just use driving as an example. I vividly remember learning to drive. And I remember, having to remember all the steps of sitting in the seat and, finding the right pedals and putting my hands at 40 and 60 or whatever it was, 45 and anyway, place them properly on the steering wheel, and check my mirrors and adjust my mirrors and put my seatbelt on and all of those things. And each one of them seemed like a big deal. And then starting to drive and the car's moving and it felt like it was going, even though I was going 10 miles an hour, it felt like I couldn't keep up. And then after a couple of months, as teenagers are, I'm flying down the road. and not worried about anything. Everything had become automatic. You've probably had that experience now after driving of being able to carry on conversations and listen to music and interact with other people all while you're driving. People do other worse things with that. They get on their phones, they text, they shave, they do all sorts of things with driving really on autopilot, but not really. Our minds have the ability to do things in the background so that we can focus on other things. And that's really great, unless our mind is taking us in directions that are not the way that we want to do. So learning how to take ourselves, our minds off of autopilot and focus our attention in the direction that we want to go on purpose, in the present moment, to be aware of everything that's happening outside of us and inside of us, and doing that without evaluating ourselves is a skill that needs to be learned and then practiced. So one of the goals of this awareness process is that we begin to notice the flow of our inner experience. I know about you, my mind is very busy. Even as I'm speaking, I'm having little thoughts of, I wonder what they're thinking about this. You know, how do I look? Is my shirt okay? You know, all of that inner process that goes on for all of us. We also have emotional experiences that come and go. Some of those experiences are elicited by something that happens to us in the moment, or something we think about. You know, an old hurt might come to mind, and suddenly we'll have that emotional experience of pain and sadness come up. And emotions rise and emotions fall, and thoughts come and thoughts go, followed by other thoughts. Learning to be able to notice the flow of our inner experience is a part of regaining control and becoming resilient. And it requires paying attention to the present moment and gaining awareness that we have the ability to choose. I'd like to just take maybe 30 seconds. We're going to do this really short. But I'd like to do a little mindfulness exercise. I'm just going to ask you to, where you're sitting, you can keep your eyes open or keep your eyes closed, doesn't matter. And I want you to just focus your attention on your breath. Focus your attention on your breath. Notice as you breathe in through your nostrils, as the air comes in, notice the sensations in your nose. The air will feel cool, usually, as it comes in. And then notice the sensations as you exhale, again through your nose. Notice the sensation of warmth as the air has been warmed by your body. Simply breathe for a few seconds. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And now I'm going to ask you to just simply imagine in your mind, picture yourself sitting in your chair, breathing in and out. Try to picture, see yourself sitting in your chair, seeing the you that's breathing and noticing your breath. And notice that there's also a you that's observing, that's watching. And that's the you that can also decide, this exercise is over and we're going to stop. So now I'm going to ask you to just come back and bring your attention back. That's mindfulness. And that's a beginning at developing your observer self. Just like a person can't learn to drive in 5 seconds, we can't learn to be mindful. It takes repeated practice, day after day, week after week, but we can get better at this. This is a skill that can be trained. All right, the next process, opening up to our inner experience. You know, when we grew up, our parents taught us things about how to stay safe in the world. If your parents were like mine, they taught me, don't touch the stove, it might be hot. Or don't run into the street because you might get hit by a car. They taught me things, ways in which to control my environment. So before I went outside in the wintertime, because I used to live where it snowed, they would make sure I had my coat and my boots on and my gloves and my mittens and my scarf to control my temperature. But I also learned that if I got too cold, I could come inside and have a cup of hot cocoa. Both instinct and learning teaches us how to avoid physical danger in our physical world and how to control and avoid physical unpleasantness. And we focus a lot on that. If you ever look at the advertising on the TV, you'll notice everything is about reducing our unpleasantness. If you have this symptom, talk to your doctor. He'll give you this medication and you'll be better. Or you'll see pictures of people, if you're feeling down, go to your local pub, have a beer with your friends and everything will be all right. And that model of fixing our unpleasant experiences gets taught to us from day one. So it's no wonder that when it comes to our inner thoughts, our inner emotions, our memories, our inner selves, we try to use those same strategies to deal with our unpleasant thoughts and emotions. But what research now tells us is that oftentimes those efforts they're actually counterproductive. If you've ever tried to stop thinking about something, you'll realize it's not that easy. If I told you right now, don't think about a pink elephant. Now, I would wager that none of you have thought about pink elephants prior to this very moment for probably months. And yet now, many of you will be struggling to get that image out of your head. It's not easy to not think about things. As anyone who's late in bed at night trying to go to sleep with their thoughts spinning around and around and around and around will tell you, trying to stop thinking doesn't really work very well. Nor does trying to avoid painful emotions. When we try to focus on not having particular emotions, not only does it oftentimes intensify them, it can also prolong them. But it does another thing. When we begin to start avoiding situations that bring up emotional pain, we find that it also cuts us off from other opportunities and other experiences that would bring about other emotions and different thoughts. And we stay stuck to those experiences, even though we're trying to avoid them. There's a metaphor that ACT uses, and I'll try to just do this really quickly. Imagine you're in a tug of war with a monster. Now, this monster is 10 feet tall and he's strong and powerful and loud and ugly and smelly. And you're holding a rope and you're engaged in a tug of war. He's trying to pull you towards him into this chasm. You're trying to stay away, to keep him at bay by pulling on the rope. You're pulling as hard as you can, and you're not getting anywhere. What's the solution? The solution is drop the rope. Well, what happens if you drop the rope? Does the monster go away? No. He stands there right beside you, yelling and screaming, making noise, trying to get you to pick up the rope again. But what's changed? You can walk. You can go where you choose. So you take a few steps. Along comes the monster. You take a few more steps. along comes the monster. So you have the ability to control where you go, the experiences that you have. What you don't have the ability to control is what comes along with you. Opening up to our inner experience in some cases means turning towards the things that are painful, not holding tightly to them, opening our hands, but realizing, yeah, they're still there. They may not go away. The third process. This is really about finding what matters to you. One of the ways that ACT does this is another metaphor, and we'll do this just quickly. Imagine that you are now 100 years old, and your family has decided to gather together to celebrate your life. You're still alive, but they want to acknowledge that and what you've meant. And so people stand up and they share what you've meant to them, the impact that you've made on their lives. Well, what would you like your legacy to be to the people that matter to you, to your friends, to your relatives, to your coworkers? How would you like to be remembered? Those are the things that we value. Those are the things that matter. Those are the things, the activities that give our lives meaning. Now, values are not goals. They're not things that we can put on our to-do list and check off and as being done. Rather, values are more like a point on a compass. So if I take out a compass and I'm hiking in the wilderness and I want to go north, I can walk north and I can keep walking north. There may be obstacles I have to go over or around, but I could keep walking or swimming all the way around the planet until I got all the way back again, and I could still walk north. Values are like that. They give us a direction, and they allow us to continue to take actions that express that value. So one of the things I want to challenge you with today is to give you a to-do. I'd like you to think about something that's really important to you. Identify one or two specific actions that you can take that express that value. Think about what are the obstacles? Why haven't you done them to this point? Problem solve a little bit about how to get around those obstacles, or find an activity that does express the value without the obstacle, and then do it today or tomorrow or this week. Okay. The last thing I'd like to do before we open this up for questions is I'm going to ask you, I mentioned we want you to use the chat line. So I've got a statement, a question down at the bottom here. And I'd like you to think about it for a minute. And then I'd just like you to type in a response to this question into the chat box. And that's going to give us some grist for the mill for next time when Robin and I are going to do some demonstration exercises focused on resilience related to FSHD. So here's the question. What symptom or experience with FSHD, and that might be for you personally if you have FSH, but it might be for you if you're a caregiver with someone who has FSH. What symptom or experience with FSHD is hampering your ability to be resilient right now today? What's the focus? Where does FSH get in the way of your resilience? So take just a minute and type that into the chat line, okay?
And while we're waiting and people are typing in, I just wanted to weigh in on some takeaways that I personally got out of today, and I hope people have taken some notes and they have their own personal takeaway. my first takeaway was when you were talking about mindfulness, being mindful on purpose, being mindful in the present, and being mindful non-judgmentally. And my difficulty is I can do it on purpose, I can be in the present, but I have a hard time being non-judgmental of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one takeaway. Obviously, your talk today, which is invaluable, requires practice. And that's why I'm glad we're having a second session where you can do so. You're going to be doing some role playing and demonstration and taking some of these comments that people are typing in right now and utilizing them to help us practice this, because it just doesn't come just by listening to one seminar. The last takeaway that I've gotten at the moment, and I'm sure if I listen to this again, I'll get some other pointers coming in, but these are what jumped out to me today, was having a purpose, creating a value to your life, something that gives it meaning, that you can overlook some of the hindrances that we physically have, and look forward, be forward looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to shut down the slides now. So there we go. There. So people can continue to type things into the chat line. I want to open this up for questions, thoughts, comments, things that people want to share.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I thought I'd jump in and just say what's stressing me out this morning.
Absolutely.
Just to get everyone moving here. I was going to type my thing in there, my comment in there. I think what stresses me out incredibly with, FSH and is having to be at an appointment at a certain time of the morning, and having, and this is kind of getting super personal very quickly, but getting organized with the bathroom, the showering, the dressing, etc., and getting to that thing on time and feeling as though I'm completely ready for that appointment. And sometimes it's it's unavoidable because I've got this appointment at 9 o'clock and I'm going to be there for 3 hours, and already I feel that stress rising in, okay, am I going to get everything done in time and get there and feel comfortable about it.
از اینجا بشنوی یا تو گوشت بود الان.
Let me jump in for a second. Cyrus, welcome. I'm sorry you missed the first half of the meeting, but if you would do us a favor and put yourself on mute, unless you want to ask a question, so that we can answer some of the other questions without interference.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Kent, you want to respond?
So, Michelle, I agree. Everything takes so much longer and is more challenging. And I don't know a solution other than finding ways to pace ourselves to the degree that we can. But it's also, I think there's a role for self-compassion. Amy mentioned the non-judgmental piece. And I know I have my own inner critic that, is constantly sharing with me all the ways that I fail to meet my obligations and don't do things, perfectly the way I want them to be. I think there's a role for learning to direct compassion towards ourselves and to be patient with ourselves. That's a key. We can't change the physical part of the challenges outside of whatever adaptive devices that we can need or use, or whatever assistance from volunteers or paid people that can help us with things. But many of these things can't be fully changed. But we can have some role in changing our attitude toward ourselves through compassion.
Yes.
And I think Donna has a question for you as well.
Sure.
Donna,
Hi.
you have your hand up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get frustrated with the that it takes double the time to get anywhere or do anything. And I am very critical, but for a 9 o'clock appointment, it means you have to get up at maybe for me, 6:30, depending on where the appointment is, to get ready, to get a ride there, however I get there. And I'm just so exhausted after the appointment that when I come home, it's just like nap time. It's like, because to walk is a workout itself, and to get into the wheelchair, to get in and out of the car is a workout. So keeping that in mind, when you wake up that early in the morning, it is very difficult to be okay with it. You're like half asleep. I'm half asleep, but I don't know what can fix this. There's not really much that can fix it, because it is what it is. It's just that you have to allow the time. And the night before, I don't know about you guys, but I go to bed early if I have something that's going to be that challenging the next day.
Yeah.
It's just a thing.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right that it's difficult. We like to live freely, that's how we would choose to live, to be able to go where we want to go and do what we want to do at the time we want to do it. And the disease makes that really difficult and challenging. There's no question. If we're going to go someplace, Sue and I, I'm thinking usually for hours ahead of time, what's going to be, what are the obstacles that I'm going to encounter? Do I need to wear my AFOs? Do I need to use a walker? Do I need to bring my wheelchair? How many stairs are there? Is there an elevator? All sorts of things that nobody else ever even thinks about. And it's occupying my mind for hours before we go. And it's influencing sometimes my decision as to whether I go or not. It's not unusual for me to decide, it's way too much trouble. But the challenge with that is then I'm sitting at home, I'm isolated, I'm cut off from opportunities and conversations and all sorts of things. And so it's like the choice between, two painful choices. Ultimately, what I've decided is that I have to continue pushing myself to do things, but I also have to prepare and plan ahead and try to balance the amount of physical exertion across multiple days instead of trying to do everything all in one shot. So it's finding that balance and being able to be okay with making conscious choices about what's best, what will work for me, and ultimately what pursuits, what activities bring me closer to what's important.
And Ken, can I add to that maybe make some notes for the next session to talk or practice working from what I'm hearing from almost all of us, including me, is frustration and anxiety that comes with these appointments, with having to get up early, with having to pre-plan, and nothing is spontaneous. And I'm sure for others, I'm finding for the first time in my life, anxiety. And I think that's a good part of what we're struggling with here today.
Mhm. Well, and I've heard other people talk about other kinds of anxiety. You know, I at times and in some sorts of situations have anxiety about just being seen, of people noticing my physical symptoms, and what that, you know, all the things that my mind tells me about how that looks, what it means to be disabled, you know, those kind of inner voice that's not always positive in terms of me and my situation. So there are lots of ways that anxiety can manifest. Yeah.
Some of the comments while we were talking that came across were some of the things that are inhibiting from your question were stiffness and chronic pain and how to deal with that in the midst of all of this. Fatigue and pain, fear of the unknown, again, muscle pain, this comes up repeatedly, fatigue is coming up repeatedly, and personal maintenance, fear of falling. I would imagine, you know, the anxiety we all have with that, getting out of my own head, being in the now.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we were talking about the time, physical time it takes to do things.
Yeah. So, you know, a couple of those things, I certainly recognize that the pain that I experience related to FSH has been less than many people. It's only recently in the last year that I had an extended period of physical pain that lasted for a few months. And I know that there are people here in this room likely that deal with that on a daily basis for years and years. So I don't want to discount pain or fatigue. I also experience fatigue. There's some interesting findings related to both pain and fatigue, is that the things that we tend to think would make them better don't always. So for example, physical activity actually has been found to be associated with less fatigue, even though all of us experience times when we actually do physical activity where we get exhausted and feel fatigued for days. And I feel that too. But the research suggests that, you know, gentle physical exercise regularly leads to less fatigue over time. That's counterintuitive. There's to some degree, I know, at least in my experience, that while physical activity sometimes can create the pain, I certainly have gone to the gym, for instance, and done a lifting exercise. I haven't done this for a few years because it was happening too often, but where I would pull a muscle and then I'd be in pain for weeks. So overexertion can certainly create pain, but pain can also come about from not moving and when muscles get tight. And so to some degree, physical activity has helped me with staying pain-free once I got there. Took quite a few massage sessions and physical therapy sessions to get there, but been able to kind of maintain that by exercising without overdoing it, finding that balance. Yeah.
And Donna Russo mentions in the chat that she's been teaching and doing chair yoga, and she finds that helps her quite a bit. I'd love to see a demonstration, Donna, because not being able to raise my arms and just sitting in a chair, I don't quite fathom how I can get my body into a yoga position without somebody putting it there for me. manually. One of the things that I find, Ken, you might want to address, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, I'm just sort of being vulnerable and voicing it for others too, is that being so mentally mindful of every movement, of not falling, of where my foot has to be so I don't trip over the walker because I'm worried about the ramp and I'm worried about where the next grab hole is, that I'm finding, I call it a mind sucker, where it literally, I'm spending so much time on my physicality that sometimes I have an issue with my executive functioning. And I feel like I'm going insane or senile. I know I'm not. I know it's just that the mind can only handle so many things at one time. So this is something you might want to address.
So that's a really great example, Amy. So there is actually a mindfulness exercise that's called mindful walking that they teach people, not necessarily people with muscle diseases. They teach ordinary people, and it involves intentionally moving very slowly and walking so that you're trying to be aware of the movement of every muscle as you take a step forward and another step forward. Okay. When I first did that exercise, what I realized was that's how I walk all the time because I have to. Because if I don't pay very close, careful attention to every muscle movement and where I place my feet and all of that, I will stumble and I will fall. And so I've had to become mindful in walking without ever having learned mindfulness. Okay. And so that's absolutely a reality. And it's also true. There are times when I'm walking with Sue and I might have my hand on her shoulder because that's what I often do in lieu of a walker or whatnot, just to keep me a little bit more stable if we're not going very far. But Sue we'll be in conversation. She'll ask me something and I can't answer because I have to focus on making sure I don't stumble. And it's like you talked about your executive function going away. Well, that's absolutely true. It's requiring so much mental effort that I don't have a lot of extra resources to carry on conversation while I'm doing that at the same time. So I think you're right, and that's true. And I don't know that there's a way around that. I certainly have easier time conversing if I'm in my electric wheelchair and don't have to worry about where I put my feet. But
and Gabriela Vasquez says that her daughter does Tai Chi modified by her instructor, and it helps her physically and mentally.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate of yoga and things like Tai Chi because I think there is a mental focusing that's required in those activities as well as the physical benefits that are there. So absolutely. Other questions? So it's 3 o'clock. I don't know if we want to continue or stop, but
I just wanted to make one more comment. What was really funny then was I was sitting in bed listening to the rest of this presentation and then realized my computer needed charging. So while you were talking about being very mindful about walking, I was walking
walking carefully
with the computer balanced on top to then plug it in out here in the office. And I was taking the steps as you were saying that. So I think that everybody I was watching earlier as you were speaking, Kent, and everyone was just nodding to all of those things that you were saying that, you know, we're all kind of experiencing, we all get it. Yes, that's exactly right. But I have to jump off here now to go and do that, get ready for that meeting I was talking about, which is actually like a rehab assessment. And you know, it's funny because it's all of these things. It's somebody looking at me going, well, you know, why can't you bend down and do that exercise, and trying to explain that. Yeah, it's all very
Because those parts don't work.
interesting. But
Exactly.
yeah, but thank you so much. I think that you've just hit the nail on the head with absolutely everything you've said today. It's just been fantastic. And Dave actually came into the room and listened in for a little bit, and he said, who's that talking? And I said, it's Kent. And he said, what? Oh my God, he's amazing. So thank you so much, Kent, and everybody today. And I'm going to jump off now, but really appreciated this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. I did.
Great.
I saw
And
one last.
I was just going to say, Michelle, make sure then, because I think it's going to be actually more impactful to come to the second series, which is on May 15th, because
Yes.
this was more or less a defining of the issues, and that one is going to be more of application.
I'll be back there then, so that'll be easy. Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.
I saw one little comment that just flew by, asking about, are there books or videos or things that can be resources? There actually are a lot. If you go onto Amazon or Barnes and Noble, whatever bookseller you're comfortable with, and put in acceptance and commitment therapy, you'll come up with probably well over, I don't know, 15 to 20 books on a variety of different topics. There have been over 600 randomized control trials of acceptance and commitment therapy for a whole wide array of life difficulties, challenges. And so there are a lot of resources. There are also video resources available, and other kinds of things. So feel free to do that, and we will talk to you soon. So at any rate, I hope I'm really looking forward to this. Robin is a dear friend of mine. We've known each other and worked together for over 20 years. And she's simply an amazing therapist. And we've done this a couple of times for different video trainings. She's used me as a guinea pig subject. And she has the ability to allow me to be pretty vulnerable on camera. And so we're gonna do some demonstration using thoughts and ideas that you guys have put in the chat line, to do some little demonstrations of ways to apply ACT in specific situations. Okay, so I'm looking forward to that. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you all there.
Great. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any final parting statement or question before we sign off for the hour.
Thank
Donna?
you.
Okay, I hope you all found this beneficial, and I hope to see you all at the next series, and mention it to other people and other family members. If they want to sign on with you, we would love to have them join us.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.